Welcome to KCR Ride's Friday Night Football preview show. We're going to break down a couple of things from last week, and we're going to lead into this coming week's Friday Night Football game of the week. This coming week, you can catch all the action on rcrlive.com, as well as 1490 and 1420 AM Rockingham County Radio. Now, one of the things to be aware of, we have two undefeated teams going against each other this coming week. Reedsville Rams versus the Moorhead Panthers. We'll get to that breakdown in just a little bit, but first let's recap what happened this past weekend. In the Rockingham County Radio Friday Night Football Game of the Week, we broadcast from McMichael Stadium as the McMichael Fighting Phoenix took on Magna Vista. Magna Vista came in with a very powerful team, a lot of offensive firepower. Their pace was really quick. Got to McMichael a little bit at first, but McMichael really put on a show. An excellent job of showing improvement from week 1 to week 2. Now, week 1, they had to go against Reedsville, obviously a powerhouse, traditional power, most successful team in the state of North Carolina's history. But they didn't let that overwhelm them against Reedsville. They played really tough. Lost in a little bit of a blowout, but the second week, playing against another really highly ranked team, McMichael showed a lot of improvement. They also showed a couple of extra weapons. This time showing a little bit of diversity on offense. Trick play led off the game for the team on their first possession. A little halfback option pass as Austin Elrod threw a touchdown pass after getting a pass from Kemp, the quarterback. So McMichael's showing a lot of growth, a lot of diversity in their play calling. I was really impressed with their defense, and my play-by-play guy with me, David Edrington, was really impressed with how much heart McMichael showed throughout the game. We both noticed that a couple of little plays McMichael could have pulled off the upset. The quarterback, Kemp, really did a great job of finding the right targets, just a little bit off in his accuracy. He's got to do a better job of just settling down. He's got such a good arm. All he's got to do is just calm down, make his throws, and he's going to do a much better job of getting those completions. On the defensive side of the ball, they did a much better job of stopping the run. Now they need to step in and get a few more dynamic plays from their secondary and their linebackers. They did have several big defensive stops. A couple of them came at really big moments, and it looked like that the tide of the game was going to really change. Opening the second half, they made a big defensive stop. Then they had a punt. The problem was a little bit of a mental miscue as the punt was caught on the bounce by a McMichael player. Then instead of downing it, he dropped the ball. Magna Vista was able to recover. That went as a fumble. They were able to take possession, go down the field. That ended up being basically a 14-point swing, because whereas McMichael would have had possession and really good field position at the 50-yard line, they ended up giving up that field position and possession. Magna Vista went down on the very next play. They got a 40-yard completion and ended up getting a touchdown soon thereafter. So McMichael just missed having a chance to really change the tide of the game right there. A little bit of a miscue. Coach Stack is doing a great job, you can already tell, changing the dynamics of that team, changing the culture of the team. Last year, they would have quit after a moment like that. This year, they really kept playing hard, and they also kept getting better as the game went. Wheeler, the running back, he's shown so far that he's a second-half guy. So they need him to get a little bit more production in the first half as well. But one good thing about showing that he is a second-half runner, that means that there's a lot of heart and a lot of effort going into the team, from the offensive line through the receivers that are blocking, through that running back that's making the runs. Now, as McMichael continues to go on through, looking for their next game, they're going to go to West Stokes. That used to be a conference game. They're just right in the county next door, so that was a nice little rivalry in the past. Last year, West Stokes had a big win. McMichael is looking to show that they're now ready to take that next step. They went from being in a blowout to being in a close game to now I think they're going to have a really good chance to win when they go to West Stokes, so I wouldn't be surprised. Really proud of the growth that we've seen out of McMichael so far. Hopefully we're going to keep that up, and that we'll be able to see them later on in the season when we're covering them for Rockingham County Radio. We'll be able to cover them for one of their first wins in a while, but I'd actually like it if they got that first win before we covered them. So good luck to McMichael this week going up against West Stokes. Hopefully they're going to get a win coming up. Over on the other side of the county, Moorhead, they went into their game and off to a great start. You know, things are starting to really come full circle there for Earl Bates. He's in his 4th year. So that 4th year brings a lot, and it especially brings a lot of experience from his players. That experience is going to go a long way toward increased execution. They've scored over 70 points combined in the first 2 weeks. Now, the first week, they gave up 40 points. Coach Bates is not going to be very happy about that kind of defense. However, the second week, complete shutout. 31-0 win took them a long way. Their confidence is going to be really high as they go to take on Reidsville. We'll go more in depth about that in just a little bit, but look for Moorhead to really try to expand on that offensive execution. 18 first downs in that game means that they are not only showing offensive firepower, they're showing offensive consistency. That begins with their 3 big playmakers on offense, the Dabbs brothers and Jadakiss Jumper. We'll go more in detail about that later. Let's go over to the Rockingham versus Reidsville game. A little bit of a strange happenstance in that game, as the game was supposed to take place at Rockingham County High School, but because of some problems with some of the lights, they had to postpone the game a day, and they had to hold it at McMichael High School. A little bit of a interesting circumstance. Reidsville and Rockingham are only about 5-10 miles away from each other, so you would think that they would have just held it at Reidsville in order to keep both sets of fans there local and maybe not miss out on some of the ones that would have maybe traveled to a closer game. But they held it at McMichael, and a big sign of county solidarity that McMichael was willing to host the game on such short notice especially. They did a great job. The field was in excellent condition even after having hosted a game the night before. No problems with any of that. No problems with people not being able to get where they needed to be parking-wise or concession stands or any of that issue. So McMichael did a great job of hosting. As far as how the game went, yeah, it was a blowout from the start. Reidsville jumped out from the very beginning. We're up 42-0 before things even got to be close. Rockingham did end up getting a touchdown later, but Reidsville had already made their way through the second and the third string at the time. They had kicked it into cruise control and did their best to make sure that the game wasn't too far out of hand and that things didn't get chippy from there. Reidsville, obviously, they're putting up big numbers points-wise, but it's really coming down to an aspect of how good their defense is. Rockingham tried their best to put out a little bit more firepower. They spread the field a little more. Problem is, they've got a lot of big, strong athletes. They might want to go in and make sure that they're powering the game a little bit. That's hard to do against Reidsville, though. So Coach Stadler, he had a really tough assignment against him to try and figure out what to do because Reidsville's defense is so dominant. Every time the running back for Rockingham was getting the ball, he was already getting hit for his first time, probably 2 to 3 yards deep. Their quarterback was harassed all night long. Even though he's got a great left-hand cannon, it's hard to throw to anybody or anyone to throw when you're throwing with someone hanging on you the whole night or you're throwing from your back. The Reidsville secondary also did a really good job of getting a lot of deflections. They know that they're going to get pressure up front from their defensive line, so they can gamble. They can play a little bit more up in the face of the receiver, look to see that they can pick off a pass or two. There were some turnovers, especially a couple of fumbles, that really cost Rockingham some offensive momentum, and Reidsville pretty much dominated that defensive side of the ball. When you're playing with only half a field, that gives you a much greater chance to experiment a little bit on offense. This year, Reidsville is throwing the ball more than they have in several years, but they've still got that running attack down pat. The offensive line, not as big, not as athletic as what you might think would produce so many 100-yard games out of those runners, but their execution is just precise. They know exactly who they need to block and when and how they need to make their movements. They don't commit a lot of penalties. You don't see them jumping off sides a lot. You don't see them holding a lot. They're a really clean and precise team at that point of attack. Their wide receivers are all really good at blocking. They know that if they don't block, they're not going to get a chance to end up getting passes later because the coaches are going to pull them out. That's one of the things about having a system in place for such a long time. They all know that they have to compete for their spots. They have to execute and they have to play to the best of their ability in order to get on the field. You've got freshmen and sophomores that know the system because they grew up with it in Pee Wee and middle school, and so they could come in and challenge juniors and seniors for playing time. That's something that Coach Bates is looking to add to the Moorhead roster as he's now in his 4th year, like we mentioned earlier. So he's got a group of seniors that have led. They know the system. Now they're being examples to that younger group. What he needs to see is a much better job of execution on the line. When they are looking to gain a lot more action at multiple positions, now at Moorhead they've got experience doing that. Unfortunately, last year was on the offensive side of the ball. The Dabbs brothers, we already mentioned how versatile they are. That was a great positive that they turned out of a really tough situation. You ended up with an injured quarterback whose brother had to step in, but the brother is one of the best runners and receivers in the area. Now, both brothers, Will and Tyler, are in their natural positions. Will playing quarterback, leading the team. Tyler, a little bit of running back, a little bit of wide receiver, playing multiple spots, getting spread all throughout the field, and therefore showing a lot of diversity and getting the ball in his hands. One game he might get 100 yards receiving, the next game 100 yards rushing. That's what happened last game. And then you throw in that third weapon, Jadakiss Jumper, one of the fastest, most explosive athletes in the area. Also one of the best defensive backs in the area, just like the Dabbs brothers. So that adds a lot of firepower to the Moorhead defense if they can continue to get that push on the line. That's what this game's going to come down to. Whose offensive line is going to execute, whose defensive line is going to execute. Whoever is able to get a little bit more time for their quarterback to put the ball in the air, a little bit of pressure on the defensive line to let the running backs get across the line for a 2-3 yard gain and maybe bust out one for a 20-25 yard gain every now and then, that's the team that's going to win. That's what Coach Bates is looking for. Are they going to throw the ball as much as Reedsville? Probably not. But if he can get 4 yards every now and then explode for a 12-yard gain, then give a little bit of a play action and then put the ball up in the air for a 15 to 25 yard gain, that's going to be exactly what they need. And they really need to see those kinds of plays early. If they can develop a little bit of an offensive continuity early, develop that offensive flow, then I expect this game to be closer than some of the local folks in Reedsville are expecting. Nobody on the coaching staff and nobody on the field at Reedsville is overlooking Moorhead. They know exactly how good that team is starting to become. They expect Moorhead to be a 3A power soon in that conference. They're going to contend with Eastern Alamance and Western Alamance and Northern and Northeast. It's not going to take long for Coach Bates to continue to build that program. Reedsville is already showing them the respect that they deserve now. The question is going to be, can Moorhead have the depth and have the execution on that line in order to step up to the next level and beat one of the perennial powerhouses in the 2A level? For Reedsville, they need to do a couple of things to continue to progress. Remember, they play in a smaller conference, so they're not going to play against a conference opponent for another 3 weeks. Therefore, they're playing some really tough non-conference opposition. They go against Northern soon, Northeast soon, Northwest. Those teams that are 3A, 4A in the local counties, they're big opponents. Reedsville has to make sure that they're progressing through those, getting ready for 2A games and getting ready for 2A playoffs. Moorhead, they're able to use Reedsville as a way to get ready for their conference because Reedsville is good enough to be competitive and possibly even win a championship in the 3A conferences. So Moorhead is not expecting any kind of a lower level competition even though they're playing against a 2A team. With that being said, what Moorhead wants to do is stay within themselves. Coach Bates is expecting to run the ball, is expecting to try and dominate that line of scrimmage. Does that mean he's going to put the ball up in the air 20 times? No. That means he's going to stick to his game plan, and they're going to try and run it down Reidsville's throat. A big aspect is going to be special teams. Now, last year, it would have been that we would have called that a wash. This year, I think I'm going to give the advantage to Moorhead on the special teams when it comes to the returner. Jadakiss Jumper can break out a 90-yard touchdown run at any given moment. He's one of the fastest players in the area, but will the blocking be there for him? Now, on the other side of the ball, Reidsville has a couple of different options for returners. They're not necessarily as explosive when it comes to having that experience rattling off a 75, an 80, or a 90-yard touchdown run like Jumper has, but they're going to get better blocking. Now, Reidsville does have the county champion in the 100 and Tyree Brown back there returning sometimes, but Tyree is gaining experience. They also have another couple of guys that rotate in and out, so not as much of the steady, tried and true returner like they had last year when Eric Petit was pretty much returning all of them. So they're going to get better blocking, but they don't have as much experience. Whereas Moorhead, they need to show that they are better at blocking this year so that those big explosive returns are not as rare as they were last year. They've got a weapon, a really good one in Jumper. They need to give him a few more opportunities to show that he's prepared to break out and have those big return games. In addition to that, that blocking's got to carry over to both sides. Now, one major aspect that we haven't mentioned yet is going to be the defensive line of both teams. Reidsville changes up their look every now and then. They'll bring 4, they'll bring 5. They blitz from linebacker. So it's really hard to predict what they're going to do. They've been blitzing more this year than we've seen the last couple of years. That's a new look that they are able to do because they've got more depth. So their defensive line is a lot of times making contact 2 and 3 yards deep with the running back and the quarterback. We already mentioned that. So let's focus on the Moorhead defensive line. Moorhead doesn't quite have the depth, but they do have the talent. They've got a couple of guys on that defensive line that can make a big play every now and then, that can get into the backfield, but they don't do it as consistently. So what we're going to look to see this Friday night is, can Moorhead step up just a little? It's not like they have to make plays that they're not capable of. They have to make more of the plays that they are capable of. So that's where the defensive line is going to come in. If they're getting better pressure, then we need to see what's going to happen with the linebackers. Reidsville is one of the teams that will attack the middle. The guys that I'm doing the games with, the color guys, we've mentioned it every week. Dr. Shotwell first, then David Edrington last week. Where are the teams that are going to throw across the middle? Reidsville has been the only team that's been willing to do that lately, the last few years. However, last week McMichael showed that they were going to throw to their tight end, and they really improved their offense because of that. Is Moorhead going to do that? Coach Bates is a really creative offensive mind. He was the offensive coordinator during the last couple of decades for Reidsville when they were winning all kinds of conference championships and state championships. So we know he can play at any kind of system. He can call plays to take advantage of his weapons. His weapons right now just happen to be small. But Reidsville is willing to go across the middle, so that's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers from Moorhead. They've really got to show that they've got the discipline to stay in their positions. They've got to show that they're not going to bite on fakes, that they're not going to leap forward and get themselves out of position to make a play, to make a deflection. And they've got to show that in order to gain that ability to deflect a pass, to knock one loose, they're not going to commit pass interference. You've got the Dabbs brothers and you got Jumper back there. in the secondary and coming up in nickel packages and things like that, playing run defense. So Moorhead does have the playmakers there. We just got to see if they're going to be able to execute. I wouldn't be surprised if this one is a really close game at halftime, and then it's going to be a matter of emotion. Moorhead is making those progressions of going from an underdog to a team to watch out for. Now they're a team that expects to win. Can they not only be a team that expects to win when the game is against an opponent that they're not necessarily emotionally involved in, but can they be the team that expects to win when they're playing a county rival and then in the coming weeks a conference rival? That's something that we've really got to see out of them, and I wouldn't be shocked if once the second half begins, if they can get a good offensive series and a good defensive series, this one might go down to the very wire. At that point, then you've got to depend on who's got the nerve, who's got the ability to stay calm. The players that can stay calm in the middle of the storm, those are usually the ones that are going to execute when things are tough. Now, with that being said, we got to make sure that Reidsville is doing a really good job of keeping their emotions in check. First week against McMichael, they had several penalties that were for things that were after the play was over with, a lot of personal foul stuff. Last week against Rockingham, we didn't see that. A much better job of staying disciplined. So this coming week, we want to see which team from Reidsville is actually the team that they're going to beat. Calm, cool, collected, execute, show that you're one of the best teams in the state, play like you expect a high level of execution from yourself, and not commit a lot of silly penalties. Or are you going to revert back? Are you going to get so amped up that you're going to do damage to yourselves? Because when you get to where you're playing against good teams, against teams that are tough in the conference like Carborough, teams that are tough in the state like Shelby, and we all expect to see them again later down the line, then who are you going to be as a team as far as Reidsville is concerned? Who are they going to be emotionally? Are they going to stay on that championship level of execution? You can catch all the action every Friday night throughout the county on Rockingham County Radio. You can catch us on the air in your car or on a radio on 1490 and 1420 AM, or you can catch us streaming online at rcrlive.com. Last week, I was able to hear from several folks around the area that were catching us live. They said the signal sounded great and that they were able to enjoy the game even though they weren't in our area. We like that. Plus, people were able to catch the game live through their cell phones because of their internet connection. So that's an excellent thing that we're able to see throughout the area. So catch all the action that you want. You can also catch replays at Rockingham Now on their website each week, and you can catch a replay of the audio broadcast on rcrlive.com as well. Plus, you can catch my recap shows and preview shows throughout the week as well. I'm Casey Elrod, and we'll be looking forward to showing you and letting you listen to the Rockingham County Friday Night Football Game of the Week every Friday night. Catch the pregame show at 7 and kickoff at 7:30. We'll see you this Friday. Thank you.